Hello, everybody. We've started to get a few of our participants coming into the conversation already, which is fantastic. I was sharing with the panelists that our attendees are generally pretty sharp on their timing, and which is going to be fantastic because we've got an awful lot of fabulous content to share today. What we will do is we'll probably just have a little chat between ourselves for 1 or 2 minutes, just so we give everybody an opportunity to jump on the webinar. Let's start trying to utilise some of our functionality and make this so Courts, you haven't done it yet. We're live and attendees are coming into. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. So perhaps everyone might like to start using the chat box and telling us where they're from around Australia. Hopefully it's a bit of sunshine. Graeme was sharing that finally Sydney has stopped the deluge of rain and a little bit of sunshine. And how's that affected your mood?
It's been very good, thank you, Jo. It's amazing, isn't it, what a bit of sunshine does. I went out for lunch yesterday with my mother, and we were sitting outside in winter sun. It was so lovely and really great to be outside and have that as well. And it might be good for people that are just watching in, just to let us know, what mood are you in at the moment? Are you in the green zone, amber zone, or the red zone? It'd be great just to see how people are feeling around Australia and around New Zealand as well.
Yes, that's right. We broadcast over the ditch to my my motherland, as you probably pick up with the funny squashed vowels, which is good. Right. Well, it's we've already got 100+ people, and we had an incredible response to our Moodometer webinar introduction. And so I'm absolutely delighted to have you all on this call. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm hosting this webinar from Naarm, the traditional lands of Kulin Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which you all work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating on this webinar. Welcome. Welcome to our panelists today. Graeme Cowan, who many of you are very familiar with. Graeme and I started our webinar journey together about 2 years ago at the start of the pandemic, when we could see that there was a collective call out from the HR and HSE communities for connection and resources on how to manage wellbeing. Today's mental health at Work Moodometer is the next phase of our partnership and commitment and passion in assisting individuals, teams and organisations to manage their well-being. Hi Graeme, great to partner with you again. I'm absolutely delighted to also welcome Emeritus Professor Gary Martin, CEO of the Australian Institute of Management in WA. Welcome, Gary. Gary is a professor at both, or emeritus professor at both Murdoch University Business School and Zhejiang, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, University of Technology in China. He has many years of experience working in and on organisations that provided Gary with many insights and experiences to truly be called a workplace expert, and is a regular columnist. And so we're super excited to hear some of your comments today. And of course, Aaron Neilson, my partner in crime at the Next Step and Safe Step. Aaron is the preferred talent partner to many of Australia's largest organisations, bringing nearly 20 years talent acquisition experience, specifically in HSE and wellbeing, to the conversation. So we're very much looking forward to the insights that you'll be able to share. So thank you all. And please, if there's anything that you would like to us to spend a little bit more time on, please use the Q&A and the chat box. We're really going to try and answer as many of your questions as we can. So let's start with our conversation with a little bit of background. Graeme, do you want to share kind of the why and the who of the Moodometer?
Yeah, sure. The Moodometer actually came from my misfortune of having a really, really bad episode of depression. And I'd see my psychiatrist and always asked me to rate my mood from 0 to 10. And I asked him why I did that. And he said, well, it helps me to understand where you are. And I also believe you should be able to learn how to manage your mood or maybe even master it. And I was a bit peeved by that and said, well, haven't I got a clinical illness? And he said, yes, you have, but I believe that everyone can learn how to manage their mood. And it really set me on a bit of a quest. And what he was largely right. There's a lady called Professor Sonia Lyubomirsky who wrote a book called The How of Happiness. And she looked at mood, or what psychologists call positive affect, and found that there were three influences. One was genetics, which we can't do too much about. Second element was the events that happened to us, and that was only like 10%. And then the third element was our intentional actions. And so when I started getting back into the corporate area, talking about resilience and well-being, I just found talking about a moodometer was a really good tool, and it sort of broke down stigma a bit. You know, it's okay to say, you know, I'm in the green zone or the amber zone, but people sometimes don't feel comfortable saying, I feel depressed or I feel anxious. And there's also really amazing evidence to show that if you are in the green zone, you're 31% more productive, 37% more influential, and 300% more creative. So there's some really great reasons to be there. And then my other work in the past was around culture change. And we'd always look at two levels. There was the individual or personal mood or culture, the team level, and then the organizational level. And so, you know, we're going to be looking at all three areas today. And the pandemic has really elevated the importance of mental health and well-being. There was a study by PwC and Atlassian that found that mental health was the #1 societal issue that employees cared about. And then just a couple of months ago, Microsoft also revealed that, you know, to really thrive in the hybrid workplace, there were three real qualities that people needed to be involved and engaged. And the first was a positive culture. The second thing was mental health. And the third thing was purpose. So mental health leads to a positive culture, purpose leads to mental health. So all paths lead to mental health.
Fantastic. That's fair. Oh, thank you, Graeme. That's and I'm sure we had a large number of our HR and HSE community respond to our moodometer questionnaire, and obviously that's what we're going to be we're talking to today. You'll have to excuse me. I'm having a couple of little technical issues, as we jokingly like to say in the webinar world. But let's get into some deeper kind of conversation if we can. Are we firing on all cylinders, or are we feeling, nah, you know, so? In the chat box, there was actually a lot of comments saying that people were in the green but under the pump, which is an interesting kind of thought there. Graeme, do you want to give a little bit of an insight into some of the respondents and the sample size that we discussed?
Yeah, it was 415 people, 414 people that responded, and there was a pretty high dominance with human resources and HSE people, which I guess reflects, you know, the customer base of the next step and the safe step. And so there was, you know, senior people involved. There's a good cross section, and we really felt that, you know, with this sort of indication or having human resource people assess this, they have a pretty good idea of how things are going on. And then, you know, the first measure was at the organizational level, what we call the workplace mood. And it might be good to just share that that slide now.
Yeah, so we started with the workplace mood, and on a spectrum of, you know, feeling very dysfunctional, toxic, and in an ineffective organisation, through to highly engaged, aligned, and competent organisation. And 58% of our respondents, again, kind of use that middle line, okay. Gary, I'd like to, if I can, ask you, when you read this data, did it surprise you? And what's the conversation that you're having with organisations, leaders and boards around workplace wellbeing and the impacts thereof?
Yeah, look, I think it's front of mind. Mental health is front of mind for most good, if you like, organisations. But I think what we're overlooking now is that we seem to have embraced what's described as toxic positivity in most organisations. A lot of organisations don't want any sniff of negativity. And so where people are experiencing difficulties, difficult situations, challenges, they want to throw positive comments onto negative feelings. And that's overly positive. So it's in many organisations, people are scared that they're going to be accused of not having a positive culture. And what that means is they have developed something called FOMO, which is a fear of a negative outlook. So as soon as anybody expresses any negativity, which is to do with their mood, what happens is that people come in quick with some positive vibes to try and snuff out the negativity. And that's where being too positive is a problem and is a mood killer, in fact. I think if I give you an example, and I use a home example, say, for example, during the pandemic, you lost your dream job, okay? And you're devastated by that, and it took years to actually get the job and to get where you were. You have a chat to your mother and your mum says to you, well, at least you got a decent payout. Or she says something like, just be positive and you'll open, a new job will open up for you soon. That's an example of toxic positivity where it's kind of not what you wanted to hear, but mums being mums sometimes want to be positive about things. If you translate that into the workplace, you can see that there are lots of occasions where someone comes to us and wants to have a chat about how they're feeling, and we don't want to hear it, or we want to turn a negative into positive very fast. And that's actually not what people want to hear. So I think even at the board level, because people want to hear the good news stuff, the positive stuff, we forget that sometimes we're averse to any negativity where we should be listening to it.
Yeah, I think that listening is an incredibly powerful. I was thinking in the back of my mind, have you met Jan Skipper in the past? Because she's definitely one of those positive mums. Aaron, what about you? As a really experienced leader in the talent market, what are you seeing talking to organisations out there around this current wellbeing crises?
I think the data certainly does resonate broadly, Joe, across the businesses and markets that we support, and it's not necessarily surprising after the 2 years or more that we've actually had. So one of the key things, though, that we are seeing, there has been a fundamental shift in people's purpose, to Graeme's point, and their decision-making priorities, with wellness and ways of working now very much front and centre for many in their decision-making process. So we're seeing that people are choosing to leave organisations if they do not feel their holistic wellbeing needs are met, and equally staying if they can see that support and investment in them is also evident. So largely in that, people are looking for organisations that demonstrate care, that they're seeking fairness, flexibility, role clarity and balance, which not only enables them to thrive at work, but equally at home as well. So, and supporting the data as well. And again, not unexpectedly, what we have seen is also a spike in workers' compensation claims, particularly as they relate to mental health and other psychosocial health factors. Again, evidence in the Moodometer results.
Yeah, thank you. And Graeme, I know as part of your work with We Care 365, you've interviewed a large number of very well respected CEOs across Australia, and many of them have spoken about their commitment to creating an environment of wellness. What are some of the actions that you've seen them implement that really kind of, demonstrate this and try to shift the mood of their organisations?
Yeah, and I might add that one of the people I interviewed was Gary as well. He was on the Caring CEO. But it's been a real privilege, and I've now interviewed 36 CEOs that champion a culture of care and a culture of high performance. And I think there's some real common qualities of these really successful CEOs, and I think they're not afraid to be vulnerable, and they're not afraid to be, to say, I don't have all the answers and we need to really work this out. I can't solve everything. We need to work around. And one of the people I've actually just interviewed yesterday was David Shane, and he started Australia's first unicorn that got sold to Dimension Data, very successful business. And he talks about the importance, this gets to Gary's point before, about two guidelines that he operates by. And one of those is accepting reality, not what reality you were, but the real reality. And the second thing is to change before you need to. And so that's getting a sniff of the winds, and knowing you can't have 100% of the information to change. And most people now say, if you've got 70%, that's a good number to make a decision, better than doing nothing. So yeah, these CEOs that promote this positive culture also talk about they also had their own struggles with the whole, lockdown as well. And by saying that, it just opens up the conversation and allows people to say what's really going on for them.
That's such an important piece, and I would imagine that there'll be some conversation around how we do that more effectively, especially using some of the more modern technology tools. We've got more connectivity than we've ever, or the opportunity to be more connected than we've ever had in the past. That's for sure. I was just looking at the chat box, and Matthew made the comment very aligned to what you were talking about, Gary, that it's actually very hard to discuss challenging issues because there's a real need, both from probably a macro perspective and in organisation, to let's focus on the positive stuff. We've had so much negativity. Let's park it and move forward. So yes, obviously some comments that are really resonating there. With the Moodometer, we really focused on both the organisation, but then into the team and individual. I think, and I do apologise. I was trying to get my slides to go into full screen, but I'm sure you can see all the data. So please just excuse the technical issues that I'm presenting here. But this was really interesting, just very much kind of showing that the team rating was not so bad. They're kind of feeling connected and engaged. I would imagine, given the work that I do talking to lots of organisations, there's been a lot of work around reconnecting teams, whether that's virtually or remotely, but actually trying to bring that connection and those relationships back together. But I think this was a piece that was really interesting. Sorry, this one just saying that actually, even though they're feeling connected, 1 in 2 people are saying that their workplace culture actually doesn't make them want to remain in their job. Again, Gary, if I can defer to you and your experience, from your observations, where do you think the disconnect is coming from between team members, teams, and organisations?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges has been that when people have had a chance to think about what they want, they've been thinking about whether they can be themselves in organisations. And that means being their authentic self is actually what people start to talk about. The reality is you can't be entirely yourself in the workplace because sometimes we want to limit our quirks and so on, but we're having trouble connecting with workplaces, and we're just realising it because of the strange environment that I think that we operate in many workplaces. I've called it before when I've discussed this with others, corporate numbness. And it's a combination of the bewilderment, I guess, dullness, apathy, fogginess, all these mood killer type words, and the disconnect that comes from the strange and contradictory type things that happen in workplaces, sometimes senseless and sometimes completely illogical as well. If you think about what happens in workplaces, there are mixed messages, there's double standards, there's all these unwritten rules, and we've seen a general erosion in workplace cultures. But to go to at the heart of corporate numbness, things aren't real for many people in workplaces. And you know, workers smile, they're told to smile and be happy when they're unhappy, for example. That's not being the true self or authentic self. You've got to get on board with a whole range of buzzwords in the workplace and sound like you know what those words mean, and that you are embracing the language that we use in workplace, or the jargon that we use, just so that people think that you're part of the crowd. And if you don't, you're disconnected. We hear about things like people say, well, I've got an open door policy. Their boss has got an open door policy, but when you go to the door, they really don't want to see you and you're interrupting them. We're told not to take work home, but then you get loaded up, so you have no choice. I think that there's also a big issue that helps to disconnect people, is what we could describe as noxious wet noodle type managers who flip, and they'll go where it seems to be popular, to make the popular decisions, not necessarily the right decisions. I think the difference now is that we're trying to, in the past, we arranged our lives around our jobs. And I think there are many people now that want to arrange their jobs around their lives, and the other way around, in other words. And I think that means that they want to connect more, but they're having trouble with this thing that as I said, I describe as corporate numbness.
Well, it's very interesting that you talk about that. And I was actually reading an article yesterday around, we actually need to stop calling it kind of the future of work, flexible hybrid work, etc. It is just, this is modern work. And we were comparing it to the industrial age, where actually lives were much simpler. They're not, to your point, they're very busy. And so is there that, that old view of having workers at the core and then other aspects around it? No, they are much, much more intertwined now. Graeme, I mean, you spend a lot of time with teams developing their well-being. What do you think some of the reason behind the score is? And are there any little small takeaways that the teams or leaders could focus on to really try and shift some of that team mood?
Yeah, when I have sessions with teams and individuals, I really ask them to reflect on what's been, think about a great team you've been part of. It could be this team, previous team, when you worked at McDonald's, your last role, this role, and what is it that really makes a great team? And usually we give about eight examples and ask people to vote on 3. And always the top 3 are, we cared about each other. And, that's, just a real human need of belonging and connection. We have each other's back. So if something goes wrong, we support each other, we work it out together. And we have a shared future. We're really interested in working together to evolve how we move forward. And, if people can just really ask themselves those quick questions, do we feel connected? Do we feel safe? Do we have each other's back? And do we share a future? And involving the team members in that discussion, in these psychologically safe teams, each individual speaks approximately equally. It's not a democracy, but people feel heard and know that they've contributed to the idea. And I think those 3 elements are really fundamental to having a good, strong team.
Yeah, that's great, fantastic insights. Thank you very much, Graeme. And Aaron, I mean, we spoke earlier. I mean, you've spent 20 plus years around HSE, the HSE market, and now it isn't just HSE, health, safety, and environment. It's HSE plus wellbeing, and we've now started to see the title of the Chief Wellbeing Officer role come into the marketplace. You know, what is this role, and do you see that it will become a role of the future and on future executive teams?
Yes, Joe, it certainly is, and it's emerged, but still emerging, depending upon I guess the sector in which you're currently working. But it's certainly something that we've seen for probably the last 2 to 3 years start to emerge, particularly across some government enterprises and other white collar businesses as well. But more broadly, I think what we're seeing is that the elevation of wellbeing is a real thing. And whilst its importance was always there pre-COVID, it really has accelerated exponentially for all of the reasons that we've already touched on. So, the Chief Wellbeing Officer role or the Head of Wellbeing role in some organisations is evolving in some respects in a similar manner to the broader sustainability agenda. With business really starting to look to bring a more informed, strategic and enterprise-wide approach into the business, and an approach that is evidence and risk-based, most importantly. So what we've seen is that the early adopters tend to be where these roles are in place, have been identified as essential with businesses where psychosocial risk factors are a significant part of their critical risk framework. We're seeing here as well in Victoria and no doubt more broadly across the country, new legislation in this space as well that's imminent will likely drive further demand for this type of position in other organisations where it's perhaps not already present. So, and I guess more across the HR and the HSE communities that we work, I think there's a common recognition from senior leaders who may currently carry the wellbeing portfolio or responsibility for that wellbeing portfolio. That there is a need to, bring in subject matter experts into this space. So we're starting to see a strong trend for people in these roles to come from a clinical psychology or organisational psychology background. The challenge there being is that the funnel of development in that space is currently a gap in the talent market. So it's great that we've got a lot of passionate advocates that are willing to lean in. However, without, I guess, those key skills, the education and knowledge, good intent is not necessarily going to lead the change that's required. So the roles are pivotal, in assisting business as well to clearly understand the positive return on investment and the tangible return on investment that is driven, but more importantly, the return on value that strategic wellbeing programs can deliver. So I think as that is better understood, we'll certainly start to see, the emergence of more chief wellbeing officer roles. Is my view.
Especially as you mentioned with that legislative piece, which around that psychosocial risk, which is, with Victoria being the first, I would imagine, of most state and territories to implement that at some time. Are they having that conversation, Gary, over from WA?
Yeah, they are. I don't know that that it's actually been embraced as much as it should have been embraced. I think there's a stage, a long lead time in terms of awareness for people in Western Australia. Some boards are now looking at the implications of the legislation and so on in Western Australia, but I think much more awareness raising needed in this state at this point.
Yeah, and perhaps a lot more awareness needed when we move on to, which I'll just share screen with our next slide, which actually gives you the data and will, I think make us all realise that, it is an incredibly important conversation that we're having when 1 in 4 people currently feel the amount of stress in their job is unmanageable. You know, Graeme, this data is obviously just the tip of the iceberg with the current challenges that we're facing into in the Australian labour market. You know, the increasing inflation, stress will no doubt continue, with only 55% of people saying that they feel comfortable speaking to their manager about personal mental health. Why is mental health still such a stigma in our workplaces?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Joe. And you know, another piece of information we got was that 67% feel that their boss cares for them, but only 55% would feel comfortable talking to them. And what that speaks to is shame and you know, really not wanting to admit that you're struggling or not having a great time. And you know, with my first personal experience, I really relate to that. You know, I did feel shame when I wasn't coping and wasn't going well. But lifting that number is really paramount, because there's much more awareness. You know, some groups like Are You OK and Beyond Blue and Black Dog have done some really great work. But still, you know, actually admitting that you're going through a tough time is a really important element. And by far the most successful ways I've seen some of that stigma broken down is having people share stories, have employees share stories. It has to be the right people. They have to be ready to talk about it. But that just really changes things when someone you know and respect in the organization talks about their struggles or trying to support someone, a loved one or a teammate previously. It just really helps to break things down and to normalize things. One of the people I interviewed in the Caring CEO podcast was Mike Schneider from the CEO of Bunnings. And he, you know, they led this charge into the UK and Ireland and had huge hopes it was going to do really well there. But it just didn't work out. It wasn't the same as the Australian market. And he, you know, he talks about how he found that really challenging. He had to get a mindset coach to help him get back on track and to learn from what happened, not dwell on what happened. And when a senior leader admits that and says, you know, I need a coach, and a running coach, mindset coach, business coach, well, all of us need help at some time or another. And admitting that you're doing that just makes a huge difference. And I very often talk about my story as I have today. And in a live situation, you'll just have so many people come up to you and say, well, I thought I was the only one. Or you know, my wife is really struggling, or my father is really struggling. And so it does open the door for more people to talk about it. And that's what helps to lower stigma.
Yeah, it was interesting when we were having the conversation, Graeme, and the lead up to this discussion, and Matthew in the chat commented on this. You know, a lot of leaders don't necessarily have the skills or the toolkit to potentially navigate some of these quite challenging conversations. And you very kindly shared, and I'll leave this one up so that people can access the information. Graeme, would you like to just share a little bit more about unpack?
Yeah. First off, it's a terrible brand, but it produces some really amazing things. So it's a joint venture between QUT, the Black Dog Institute, and I think also the Remote Rural Mental Health Service. And so you've got the experts of QUT and Black Dog Institute who systematically go through all these free virtual programs that are out there. And they've got so many categories. So, you know, they've got specific categories for eating disorders or post-traumatic stress or bipolar or obsessive compulsive disorder. And they publish evidence-based virtual solutions. So for the HR community out there, I'm sure you have lots of people that, you know, can't access experts for whatever reason. And this just tells you how you can access helplines and online chats and blogs. And they've been assessed and shown to be evidence-based in making a difference. So yeah, a big recommendation for that. There's so many great resources to download from there.
Thanks, Graeme. That's fantastic. Sorry, I'm just trying to share. I think we have got my technology is going to be improving. We have got some laptops apparently that have been stuck in the supply chain on their way. So next webinar, we won't be having these issues. Gary, I mean, you know, look, we're missing it, I believe, right now, but there's a conversation happening from the Treasurer today. You know, Australia's nigh on at full employment, and with the current wellness issues the country's facing into, both physically and mentally, you could suggest that stress will not be in decline over the next 12 months at all. What action should executives and boards be focusing on with that really sobering statistic?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting because I think what we're really talking about is the potential for people to experience burnout, and that everyone knows is about exhaustion. You know, you become very cynical and you don't believe you're able to do your job. So we know that people who end up being overloaded head towards burnout pretty quickly. The unfortunate thing is, though, that over the years we've been talking about self-care, which in itself is a good thing. People have to take care of themselves, and they do. And so, you know, the go-to response for many leaders and managers when it comes to managing stress is, or you need to have a few days off, and you'll come back and you'll bounce back after you've had a few days to recharge. And of course, that might help in the long term, and it's part of a self-care plan where you do things you enjoy and so on. But the reality is only your boss can cure burnout. And that's because when you think about the sorts of things that managers and leaders, less so boards, but they need to monitor these sorts of things, is if you look at the culprits of burnout, it's having too much work to do. That's a culprit. There's another one, a lack of autonomy. So you end up being micromanaged all the time. There's little or no recognition, and there's perhaps a toxic workplace culture. All of those things can contribute to burnout. So we need managers to recognise that it's not just send someone off on their annual leave or their week-long holiday. It's actually about trying to allocate workloads across a team in an equitable way. That's one thing. Making the priorities clear to people. So rather than saying to people, we've got a lot to do, what are the priorities? What should we get done first? And that automatically can help alleviate the stress if people know what they should be doing rather than having 20 or 30 different things to do. And then, of course, matching the tasks and the projects to the knowledge and expertise of individuals is going to help as well. But again, when people talk about burnout, the go-to response has been, oh, you better go and look after yourself, have a week off. But there's a lot we can do in the workplace to do this, and that's why, to address this. And that's why this role of a chief wellbeing officer, for example, that Aaron was talking about, can help to try and coordinate these sorts of responses across an organisation. I'll say one other thing too, and that is that part of the stress around employment levels and so on is that in a current environment, there are organisations that would normally terminate the services of some of their employees because they weren't actually doing the right job, they were causing a problem and so on. And so they'd go through a process of termination. And that is happening a lot less. Now, if you're a non-performer, that might be a good thing for you. However, it actually causes added stress on others who have to pick up the workload as well. So we have people that, the reliable people in workplaces being pushed to do more than their fair share of work. And that's what I mean by saying allocating workloads in an equitable way, because it's the same old few that are the reliable ones that get things done, but they're also the ones that are going to be more prone to burnout.
It's actually interesting. It's a conversation that I know Aaron and myself and our teams are having regularly, talking out there in the HR and HSE communities, because we've kind of got this busyness happening. Everybody is so busy, and suddenly there was this view of, well, just take leave, just go and take a week's leave. But to your point, the people that do care about their organisations, do care about their colleagues, kind of sitting there going, I have got such a large workload at the moment, I can't just go and take 10 days leave, because where is that work distributed to? And my colleague sitting next to me is already overflowing, and the next person's overflowing. And so there's kind of this cycle coming from a very positive place, but because we haven't necessarily adapted our organizational design, our real thinking around goal, strategy, goals, and what we can actually achieve in the right time frames. Because, you know, hey, I'm part of an executive team. We love to put markers in the sand, and then suddenly that time is there, and you go, oh my goodness, we maybe should have given ourselves a little bit more time to deliver on that project. And I'm sure that's the case for so many other organizations as well. Aaron, another conversation that we're having extensively, although we're not so aligned on this one, is around the Great Resignation, or was that maybe just a phrase of January, February 2022? But you know, ultimately, Great Resignation. How can a wellbeing strategy support engagement and retention?
Yeah, look, I think it's an important question, Joe. And look, I'll be really open and share that I'm a little bit of a cynic and have been around the Great Resignation debate, and whether we'll actually, fully realise the impacts here in Australia as perhaps they have in the US. They're two very different contexts, but fundamentally what we are seeing is significant movement in the market, which is driven by demand far outstripping supply, and therefore. With opportunities at their highest level for some time, and likely to continue, for certainly the short to medium term. I mean, if you look at the talent markets, they lag, any change in the broader economic environment. So we're at least, I think, 6 to 9 months where demand is going to continue to outstrip. So whether it's people moving for that reason or people moving as it relates to the Great Resignation, it's going to be critical for leaders and businesses to really understand, I guess, that connection between a holistic wellbeing strategy, engagement, attraction, and also retention. So, I think, speaking to the converted of those on this call, but, it's well understood that generally, and perhaps more so now off the back of COVID, people are wanting to feel supported in the workplace. They want to be provided an environment that is conducive to them getting their job done and feeling good about themselves in the process, and an environment or a work environment that really provides them with that, overused phrase, but freedom within a framework such that they can architect their own individual preferences in a way that's meaningful to them, but in a way that also meets their team or their business unit needs, and then the broader objectives of the overall business they're working for. So I think getting that tripartite relationship between those three aspects right is really essential for organisations to be able to, harness and find that appropriate balance such that people, are comfortable and want to, work within that business, within that culture. So, and I think the conversation that we're hearing a lot at the moment is organisations also looking to shift, from the notion of wellbeing at work to, that holistic wellbeing approach that not only enables the worker to go home safely, but to go home in a better place than what they arrived or how they arrived at work. So creating that reciprocal relationship that's positive from a work context, but equally enables them to also engage in a meaningful and positive way as they return home. So if that can be achieved through workplaces and done so successfully, I think there's lots of research that shows that a workforce that feels that empowerment, with the ability to shape their ways of working, will be highly engaged, will see productivity improve, and again, evidence of that return on investment and return on value being more evident across the broader business. So, but again, as touched on earlier, the challenge is these ways of working are not necessarily enabled through the work systems and the current work environments that exist, and the broader social risk factors do exist. So transforming how work is done and the org design piece associated with that, and that reframing, I guess, of that entire work ecosystem is really, really important, such that the strategy really becomes about people sustainability, as it is in other areas of sustainability, which we're seeing evolve quite rapidly as well.
It really feels like this is a conversation, and as I mentioned, Graeme and I connected 2 years ago, although he's been doing this work for some time, and it's the conversation that had been simmering, but it's at an avalanche speed now. For all the reasons that we've discussed, and it's fantastic to be part of this panel and bring this conversation and topic to the table. We're all out there having conversations with lots of different organisations. Are there organisations who are doing this well, who have made a real focus around well-being? Graeme, I know you've spoken to a lot of organisations. Is there anyone that kind of is at the pinnacle, at the peak at the moment that we should try and follow?
I think that there's lots of organisations trying to do good things at the moment, but it's often been very, very reactive. And when I think of organisations that do it well, they have a longer term plan. They know that Rome isn't built in a day, and you have to have a multi-year plan. And one group that I have seen that does that is Lend-Lease, does that very well, and they monitor key performance indicators of people's health. So they look at their if they're seeing a doctor about sunspots because construction workers being outside, looking at cardiac health, but actually monitoring it over time. And I saw a graph where they monitored it over the last 5 years, and that's the real mindset that we need, is to have a systemic approach to it. There's smaller companies that are doing good things as well. Like, Beaumont People have just gone for a 4-day work week, and they've made it work. Everyone, manages how they do, but, having a refreshing outlook, not just trying to do things faster or better, but actually saying, well, can we do it differently? And, we now are just about 5 or 6 weeks away from Are You OK Day? And when we started it, 13 years ago, we were hopeful, but we had no idea how important it would become. And, I think the real challenge is for organisations to go to a Are You OK 365 mindset, where, things are implemented over the year that really encourage people to go forward. And along that line, I'm putting together a webinar in 2 weeks' time, which is about how to build a mentally healthy culture, the ultimate checklist. And I'll just share in the chat there, and it will help hopefully for people planning for Are You OK Day or for Mental Health Month or Week in October.
Fantastic, Graeme. And there's been a couple of questions asked just around the slides, etc. They absolutely will be shared. Anyone who registered as a participant, the slides will be shared. We'll make sure that Graeme's additional link to his Are You OK webinar is available as well. And equally, we're recording this session, so it will be available on our website for future reference. But thank you very, very much for everybody's contribution. We've got a little bit of time available, and there's been wonderful comments from participants. If anybody would like to ask our panelists a particular question, please feel free. We've got a plethora of great minds, and let's try and solve this great workplace challenge that we're all facing into together. So please feel free, fire away.
Jo,
yes.
While there's people thinking of questions or questions coming through, I just wanted to pick up on something that Graeme said about the 4-day work week, because I'm actually quite intrigued with this whole area, and how some are able to make this work and others are not. One of the things that I find interesting is that the model being trialled in the UK and coming to Australia apparently in August is that you can actually take 5 days work and shove it into 4 days. And it kind of goes against the grain when we're already saying that people are overworked, and all of a sudden we're going to say, well, you know, if they don't have so many meetings, and if they don't, people, you know, don't duck out and see the kids when they're starring in some school play or something like that in the middle of the day, then we'll be able to manage all of that. So I find it a move to move to something like a 4-day work week where you're expected to do 5 days work in 4. I find it quite bizarre that we would get to that particular point in time when exactly what you just said a few minutes ago was, well, hold on, people are stressed because their workloads are high. So what are we trying to do to people? Are we trying to kill them? You know, in this sort of thing. That's I just don't understand.
It's a really interesting comment, and I can give you an example where, you know, we've run 2 pilots and now launched a 9-day fortnight into our organisation. But we ran a pilot for a 4-day working week. It was really challenging. You know, we're in customer facing roles, and so there's times when there isn't a sorry, I'm unavailable, come back to me on Monday morning, and that was really hard to navigate. But we've implemented the 9-day fortnight across our entire business, and I have to say it is absolutely phenomenal. Our NPS scores, because we use the Net Promoter Score, has elevated in this incredibly challenging time. So it's pretty close to, well, ridiculously world-class, over 90 positive NPS score. And our employee satisfaction and their comments around connectedness has increased. So that model for us has worked, just as a bit of an example there.
And I think you also have to...
Sorry, Graeme, you go.
I was just going to say just on this, because I'm really fascinated by this 4-day work week as well, and have looked at examples around the world. But, you know, in places like Japan, for example, known as workaholics, Microsoft put a, you know, pilot in place where they work 4 days a week, and they found out that the productivity increased. But often the ones that do it well do things differently. And so there's usually a lot less meetings. People are much better prepared for the meetings, and they're usually much smaller, you know, just with small containable groups. And yeah, you know, I think we just have to take a real learning mindset to this and see what works, what doesn't. And everyone that has their own journey can share what worked. You know, you shared yours, Joe, and there's others as well. I just think we have to look at this because it's challenging, this ridiculous busyness obsession.
Yeah, it is. And I think somebody commented that they're using that phrase, that badge of honour. Just going back to a couple of questions. David Kenning asked, do you think that toxic positivity in the workplace stems from compassion fatigue that HSE and HR professionals feel, especially during the pandemic? Perhaps, Gary, I can ask you this question, because it was certainly that phrase, toxic positivity, that we initially discussed with you.
Yeah, look, I think we've always been in organisations trying to be positive rather than trying to hear people out when they have negative feelings. I think there's no question about that. But I agree that during the pandemic, because there's been even more cases to listen to, people have just said, I can't deal with this. I've got to get this positive atmosphere back again. And there is an element of fatigue there with people. Of course, what that does, though, when you suppress people's feelings, is it doesn't improve their mood. It actually kills their mood even more. If they don't feel like they've been listened to, there's been no empathy, then it doesn't work for a lot of people, I would say. But I think there's a big element of fatigue there.
Yeah.
Susan David, a psychologist from Harvard, she's got a book called Emotional Agility, and she has really found that pretending to be happy just doesn't work. You know, it just doesn't work. Actually being able to express authentically how you're going helps your performance over time. So, you know, it is a toxic mindset when you think, oh, we'll just talk positive. If you've got a sinking boat, it doesn't matter how much positive you talk, the boat's still sinking.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know whether we've got a solution for Verity, but she's asking, what are your suggestions when specific aspects related to toxic culture and roles are raised and no substantive actions are taken by leaders?
It's bloody hard.
Well, there's an authentic response.
Honestly,
yeah.
the thing that infuriates people is filling out, employee engagement surveys, nominating what needs to happen, then nothing happens. Like, that's how you lose people really, really quickly. If leaders don't walk the talk, if they don't, I shared before David Shane's mindset that, you have to accept reality, not as you see it, but the real reality. And you need to change before you need to change. And I love those two things. I just think it encourages continual improvement, but not taking, Gary and Aaron will do this as well. If you don't take action, it drives people crazy.
I think there's also an issue here too, that if we've done our best to try and change things and raised issues and there is no response, if we go back to Joe's comment earlier about the jobs that are available, there does come a point where you have to weigh up whether the current environment is good for you and for your physical and your mental health. And if it's not, you need to start to make some plans to exit that organisation. And at the moment, because of the jobs market, there's more chance that you'll pick up a job in an organisation that you're happy with, and that you can work with in a better way, and it's better for you. The problem, of course, is the grass is not always greener on the other side as well. But at the moment, because there are jobs available, people can pick and choose a little bit. And I think we all should weigh up whether the particular position that we're in within a team and within an organisation is actually good for us. And that means our health.
Yeah, no, I absolutely concur. I did see a meme or a picture on LinkedIn many years ago, and it's always stuck in my mind, of a picture of a tree, and it said, you're not a tree, you don't have roots, leave. And I thought that, it's true, because rounding out this conversation, if the impact of you staying in a toxic environment or a toxic team or under and working with a toxic leader, it will impact you and the others around you in your family, your friends, your support network. And that's, you can only look after yourself first and foremost. I will just go to share screen, because whilst my technology is not so savvy, we have got a QR code for people to scan if they could, because we will be doing our moodometer measurement again. And if you would like to be part of the discussion and be part of the discussion from this webinar in future webinars, please scan the QR code, fill in your details, and we would love to have you part of the team again. Thank you again, Gary. It's just been an absolute pleasure to meet you, and I'm going to take away some of those phrases and use them in my own commentary. Graeme, it's always just so wonderful, and absolutely delighted that you came to the next step and the safe step to co-author the moodometer, and we're delighted to partner with you on this. And Aaron, my partner in crime, as always, thank you very much for your contribution and the real insights, specifically around that psychosocial risk and chief wellbeing officer that we're, as the HR and HSE community, going to have to probably learn a lot more about in this period of time. So thank you all to my panelists. As I shared earlier, we will make the slides available, the links through to Graeme's future Are You OK webinar, and this recording that you may well use in future. So thank you very, very much for joining us, everybody. See you soon.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.